In this lesson, we're going to take a look at the case where the user might have disabled their cookies, which is going to make it so that our simple redirects are not going to work for storing sessions. So what we'll see is that sessions are actually stored in cookies, but if the cookies are disabled, of course, that means we can't store a session. So we're going to look at another way that we can get around that by using what's called URL rewriting. So we'll need the City Manager web session URL Re-Writing.mp4 file. Go ahead and import that and once again rename it to City Manager Web. And what you'll also need to do if you want to see this in action is you'll need to disable cookies on your browser. So what we'll do is we'll actually use a browser outside of Eclipse to do this just to make sure everything works as expected. Eclipse has a little bit of a problem keeping up when we're trying to do this all inside of the Eclipse browser. So it's a little easier to just look right at the Google Chrome browser. We'll also want to have our Fiddler open so that we can watch what's going on behind the scenes. So when we left off last time, we had our login page, our user login. So let's go ahead and start our server here, and let's try to go to the authorized page, which of course we should be unauthorized. We have our default code in place as we left it before with some other code that we can turn on later, and that's going to actually help us to do the URL rewriting in a moment. Let's go ahead and run this, and it will run again inside of Eclipse just fine and redirect us to login. But what happens is at this point it kind of starts to blow up. So let's go ahead and move to Chrome. You can just copy the URL. If you want, you can even invalidate the session just to validate that everything is going. So you could say invalidate your session and then go back to login.html. Now, before I do anything else, I want to just look at a couple things. Let's look at Fiddler real quick. So you can see here that on our Fiddler requests, we have a get in place. And you can see that here we're looking to set a cookie for JSessionID, and it has this big long ID and it's essentially all the information about that. The thing about this is what you'll see is that that JSessionID is supposed to be set in a cookie. Well, if I have my cookies disabled, of course, that's not going to work. So what's going to happen is I'm going to try to log in. And remember that our login doesn't matter here. It can be whatever we want. But what happens is we still get unauthorized. Now, how did that happen? Well, because our cookies were disabled, we were unable to set that cookie, and so when the page went to pull it up, it wasn't able to pull a session because it was like the session was new every single time. So there's nothing that we could do in order to make that cookie pull the session, and thereby nothing happened. And you can see when you look at each one of these URLs that's blue here on the screen, but essentially you can see those are just the URLs. There's nothing about the session ID in the URL. So what we're going to do is actually use URL rewriting to fix this problem. So let's go ahead and remove all from this so that we can track this a little easier the next time. And we'll go ahead and leave our browser open, but we'll basically stop our server here and restart it once we change. So what we're going to do is only change for this demonstration the user login page. Now that's the one that we redirect to after we hit our login page. Remember, this brings us to the user login.do servlet. So what we're going to do is simply uncomment both of these sections and comment out the send redirect. Instead, we're going to send redirect using an encode redirect URL command on the response. That's all we have to do, and we don't have to do anything else, and this will automatically set our redirect URLs to have that JSession ID in play. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's once again go to authorized here so that we don't accidentally log in through this page. The authorized still is not going to redirect correctly, so authorized is not going to work, and that's fine. But what we want to do is have our login ready to go, and we can then go back to our page here. And once again, just to verify that everything is, of course, incorrect, let's go ahead and invalidate the session and make sure that that happens. And then let's go back to our login page. So we just go to login.html. And here again, we can put whatever we want. Go ahead and log in, and now it says welcome authorized user. Well, how'd that work? Well, look right there in the URL, you see JSessionID equals D3, etc., and so on and so forth. So I didn't have to do any work other than encode that URL correctly with that redirect, and it falls back onto that URL redirecting or URL rewriting. So the good thing is that if my cookies were enabled, it would still work with the cookies. But if my cookies are disabled, it now falls back and goes ahead and uses that session ID. And you can look at your Fiddler real quick, and you can see that it does in fact have the JSession ID right in the URL, of course, in Fiddler, which we already really saw because it's visible right here.